Hello, and good evening. Tonight I'm going to share with you the story of a woman who shattered barriers throughout her entire life. I know that we all have that special family member or close friend that has been a great inspiration to us or achieved greatness. And possibly that greatness or inspiration has taught us invaluable lessons that we carry with us to this day. That inspirational person in my life is my grandmother, Virginia Weber. She broke barriers from a difficult birth to living through the Great Depression, to becoming a licensed pilot, to aiding the war effort, and going on to get a continuing education after she became married and then had children. All of these things were uncommon for women of her era. To better help you understand my grandmother and her situation in particular, I'd like to explain to you a little bit about how she started, or how she got her start breaking barriers. My grandmother was born in rural Ohio in 1920 to young parents who had had other pregnancies and lost all of the other children. Her mother had a difficult labor. My grandmother was less than 5 pounds, and her prognosis was not good. The physician advised her parents that she would not survive, but survive she did. And she started to thrive very early on. Thriving was the term that doctors used to describe a healthy child after delivery. My grandmother went on to survive the Great Depression and became a licensed female pilot in Michigan in the late 1930s. She flew crop dusting aircrafts and other small aircrafts for farmers in her community. When the war broke out, she signed up immediately to aid in the war efforts by becoming a pilot once they had sent all the men off to war. This was unprecedented for women with her skill set at the time. While she was unfortunately just a little bit too short to fly for the war, she was able to offer her services with some skills that she had acquired in the General Motors rubber factory. The factory that she worked at created tires for vehicles that were aiding the soldiers on the front line. At some point towards the end of the war, my grandmother met my grandfather and they got married. While he was still in service, they traveled around, finally settling in his home state of California in a town called Burbank. My grandmother started her career with the Burbank Unified School District in the late 1940s as a pool typist. So that was more like an entry-level position. We're taking dictation, typing papers for managers or supervisors in the department. My grandmother worked there for several years before becoming pregnant. In the 1950s, it was very common for women to either be terminated or coerced into giving up their job once they became pregnant. My grandmother fought this and rallied, arguing that because although she worked at the school district, she did not directly work with any young children who could be scandalized or have impression created upon them by her pregnancy. The superintendent of the school district was actually inclined to agree, and she was allowed to remain at her post until she started showing, which was quite a feat in 1953. Although I'm sure many people, including some of our family and her friends at the time, expected her to do her duties as a wife and mother after my father was born, she chose to stay home for a respectable period of time before announcing that she would in fact be returning to her post at the school district. My grandmother continued her education at this point, attending business courses and receiving a certificate of completion in the 1950s. She continued her career with the school district, working her way up through promotions over the years to end up as the senior secretary to the superintendent of the entire school district. She worked for 44 years and 9 months, building her career and volunteering along the way. Throughout her life, my grandmother valued education very highly, especially the education of women. She worked with various organizations and donated countless hours of her personal time with the intention of aiding women to become better educated throughout the country. She shared her values and beliefs with me throughout my entire life, and in fact, many times signed me up to volunteer with some of these organizations without my knowledge or consent. However, I'm grateful that she did. In addition to sharing her values and beliefs, she gave me a great gift. She paid for my entire private school education so that I could have the best opportunities available to me through education at that time. Well, I hope that you have enjoyed learning about my grandmother. It is my greatest desire that she has become somewhat more than someone's grandmother to you. She was so much more than just a woman of her time to me. She was an inspiration. She survived many obstacles and broke many barriers in her life to become an icon and a woman above her time. She survived a difficult birth, low birth weight, the Great Depression. She became a licensed pilot in the late 1930s when women were generally not allowed to do these things. She aided the war effort during World War II, got a higher education, and became a career woman after marriage and motherhood. Virginia's stories inspired me to become a daring and courageous woman in my youth. I continue to draw on that now as I pursue a higher education of my own and continue to give back to my own community in my free time. My greatest wish is that you will be inspired in some small way to find strength in her story as well. Thank you so much for your time. Have a wonderful evening.